So by now you've probably dried some food. You've probably frozen some food. And now we need to can some food. So in today's episode, we're going to talk about canning in 3 different ways to can.
To have a good harvest, one must plant good seeds and must also use the right kind of fertilizer. The carrots have grown large and firm. How good they will taste.
Welcome to the Backyard Gardens Podcast, a companion podcast to the upcoming documentary Backyard Gardens the Movie, a story about 2 families growing their first gardens in a world that lacks nutrition. I'm your host and director, Ben Neville.
And joining us today is my lovely wife again, Kelly Neville.
Thank you for having me, my wonderful, beautiful husband.
With her NPR voice. So, canning is, I think, considered the holy grail of food preservation. Long term, don't know how long exactly, but we will get into what we're eating now and how old it is. And it is a little tricky to learn, but once you get a hang of it and you find the right resources, it is not that bad. So, starting out, it's important to know what vegetables to can in certain ways. And my wife does most of the canning. I am involved a bit, but she does most of the canning. So she's going to talk a lot about that. And just as a disclaimer, pressure canners can be intimidating, and you've probably heard a lot of horror stories about them, but with proper maintenance and the way technology has come over the years, it's not going to explode on you as easily as it may have back in the 40s or 50s. So you may remember in a previous episode, we talked about how we got our first canner and we were waiting for the top to blow off of it, and it never happened. But it was a very, how would you put it, nerve-wracking experience.
We were hiding behind the island in the kitchen. We weren't just waiting. We had ducked for cover.
And it never happened. And that was 7 years ago now, 8 years ago. So we haven't had any issues, but after saying that, there is a possibility, and just know that. But with the right care and maintenance and having a watchful eye, you should be just fine. So the first way we're going to talk about is water bathing. So Kelly, do you want to explain what water bathing is?
So water bathing is when you have a large pot of water that you put on your stove, and you literally just bring it to boil, and you've got your canned goods inside it, and you process them in the boiling water for whatever your recipe says to. And the boiling process and the heat will seal the cans.
And then the other one is pressure canning. So you can do that on stovetop. You can do it on an open burner, or you can do it via an electric canner. So there's multiple ways to do it. And the other thing to remember too is these aren't just pressure canners, they're pressure cookers. So you can cook your roast in, I guess, about 15 minutes probably. You can cook dried beans in 3 minutes. You can do a lot of things with this other than can. So when we talk about canners and stuff, remember that they're tools that can be used for multiple things. So, and water bathing is not just washing your vegetables with soap and getting them clean. So, what is the number one vegetable that you water bath now?
Well, that's a trick question, because really the number one vegetable is a fruit. I do jellies and tomatoes.
Okay. And why do you pick those? Like, what is the criteria for you to know that you're going to water bath?
So the criteria for doing a water bath, it has to be a high acid food. So things like blueberries, strawberries, raspberries, those all have a high acid content. Things like pickles and relishes, tomatoes also are high acid. And if you have a certain type of tomato that may not be as high acid, usually recipes call for a little bit of vinegar or lemon juice to raise the acidity. So, and this is important because having a high acid content in your foods will help prevent bacterial growth. Any foods that are not very acidic, things like green beans, peas, those vegetables have to be pressure cooked because there's too much of a risk for bacteria to grow.
You mean pressure canned?
What did I say? Pressure cook?
Yeah.
Yeah, I meant pressure can.
Because you would, if you pressure cook peas, you would turn them into mush.
Yes, you would have pea soup.
Which isn't bad. In the pressure canner, it takes 7 minutes to make split pea soup, just for the record.
So since you brought up time, I'm just going to add in that although foods in a pressure cooker don't take very long, it's just a matter of minutes, it does usually take the pressure cooker to reach the appropriate pressure, which can take up to 10 to 15 minutes.
So the exact definition I have here for low acid foods, they have to have a pH value higher than 4.6 up to 6.9. They include red meats, seafood, poultry, milk, and all fresh vegetables except for most tomatoes. Most mixtures of low acid and acid foods also have pH values above 4.6 unless their recipes include enough lemon juice, citric acid, or vinegar to make them acid foods. So that being said, like I water bath, I keep wanting to say water bathe. I water bathe jalapenos because I put vinegar in them. So that makes them high acid, correct?
Correct. Now, it sounds confusing when we start talking about pH, and I just try to stay away from discussing pH because on a pH scale, the lower you go, the more acidic it is. So it just gets confusing when we talk about low acid versus high acid foods because it's actually an inverse relationship with the pH.
But we're not going to worry about pH value because what you're going to do is you're going to look in your garden and decide, this is what I'm growing. Let me go specifically look up this vegetable and see how it needs to be canned. That's the best way to do it. Don't worry about the pH value, right?
Correct.
I mean, I don't have a pH test kit at my house.
No, you just need to be aware of what foods are low acid versus high acid.
Right. And again, through this conversation, we're going to bring up our faithful website, pickyourown.org, because they talk about, they'll break it down for you. If you go to that website and you say, I want to can summer squash, then you just go to that website and you type in can summer squash and it'll pop up and tell you. Sounds really gross.
I feel like that's on my top list of things I don't like canned, along with mushrooms and asparagus. But somebody out there might like canned squash.
Truth.
I can respect our differences.
Yeah, so I'm on their website now, and squash yellow is 5.79 to 6 pH. So that makes it low acid, correct?
No. Yes. See, that's why I don't like to talk about pH. Let's just not talk about it at all.
Let's not even worry.
So, generally speaking, all fresh vegetables need to be in a pressure canner.
Yeah, except for tomatoes.
Most tomatoes.
Most tomatoes. Was there a tomato? What tomato can you think of that's not high acid?
I have no idea, but I know I add lemon juice to all of my canned tomato.
Yeah, because the recipe tells you to.
Water bath recipes.
Yeah.
Correct.
And if your grandma tells you to put aspirin in it before you do it, don't do it. That's false. And if you go to this website, it's in like bold red and flashing. Don't use aspirin. Maybe the vegetables got a headache. I don't know. But I'm not going to use aspirin in it. So just don't do that.
So Ben brings up a good point, though, with our grandparents. And you have to make sure that you use the right equipment. And, there's probably a variety of different jars out there. I want to say that I use Ball all the time just because that's what's at the grocery store.
That's the standard.
Yeah, but what you don't want to do is use some vintage jar that looks cool because it might be compromised, and just don't trust anything that's super old.
No, it's not that it might be compromised. It is compromised. Just think about it that way. So before you can, there's a process to get the jars ready. What do you do? I talk about sterilizing the jars.
So I have a very systematic approach that I use in the kitchen.
That's an understatement.
Well, everybody's a little OCD to some extent, and it helps when you're working with sterile equipment. So I clean my kitchen. I set up a little space where I've got a dish towel laid down that I'm going to put all my canning equipment. And the first thing I'll do with the jars is I just wash them with soap and water. I wash the lids and I wash the rings, and then I want to sterilize them. So for me, I get a big old pot of water boiling, and I use that for sterilizing, and then I just kind of keep it on the stove and keep it warm because then I can use it for water bathing.
So this is a good point about multi-use tools, is the same pot that you use to water bathe your jars in is the same pot that you can use to sterilize your jars in. Okay? So that's a good thing to remember.
It's also a time saver because it takes a long time. Well, we have an electric stove, so it takes a long time to get that large pot of water up to boil.
Oh, it's mind-numbing. And that's why you don't really want to can one can at a time if possible. You want to do, have a canning session. Back in the day, they had canning parties, kind of like quilting parties. Everybody would get together and they would can their vegetables and talk and hang out because it takes a little bit of time, and especially at first, but once you get a hang of it, it's not bad.
Another way that you can sterilize, if you have the right dishwasher, and you can just put the jars and lids and rings in the dishwasher and run it through a sterilization cycle as well.
Yeah. And why don't you do that?
Because our dishwasher is always full.
So there you go. Empty your dishwasher out. That's the downfall of eating at home all the time. I was just saying the other day, we need to get another set of silverware so we don't have to wash as many dishes. That's pretty bad. But yeah, and you cannot reuse the lids. You can reuse the rings, but not the lids. So once you use that lid and it seals and you pull it off, when you're done with that can of food, you throw that initial lid away and you can go buy refills for the lids. Okay? So we used to use, I think they're narrow mouth jars.
Regular.
Are they called regular?
They're called regular.
Okay.
Yeah.
So we used the regular jars, and I don't like using those. So we are switching over to wide jars.
Yeah.
And so the wide jars, and the benefit of this is if you have all of your jars with the same diameter of the top, when you go to buy refills, you only need to buy one refill. Right?
Yeah, that's right. I actually just ran into that problem yesterday when I was pulled out some jars to can some green beans, and I had 2 wide mouth and 2 regular. But fortunately, we had enough lids for
because we had bought a bunch of narrow lids, or regular lids, excuse me. And what we're doing is we're going through all the regular lids, and then when we're done, we're just going to get new jars and start with the wide jars because they're easier to get in and out of, and they're easier to pack.
I'm about a foot shorter than Ben, so my fingers fit in the smaller jars a little easier, but the wide mouth ones are nice.
Look, if I need to get a pickle, I want to get my pickle. And if I want to get the juice, I'll get the juice, but I need my pickle.
I heard that.
So just remember that when you're going to buy your jars, decide what size you want and try and stick with it. And there's different sizes of jars for different things. So when we can our green beans, we like to use what are they, quarts, the big ones?
No, we use pint size for the green beans.
That's the little ones?
Middle of the road.
Yeah, but I like to use the big boys.
Yeah, the big ones are the quarts.
Yeah,
you can actually go larger than that, but I think you have to go to somewhere other than just your average grocery store, like a specialty store, to find larger than quart.
And we'll get into why we're using pints here in a second. But so anyways, back to the water bathing. So explain your process behind water bathing, how it works. versus like the packs and the hot packs, cold packs, stuff like that.
So after I've gotten my equipment sterilized, or even while my jars are sterilizing, I start to do my food prep. And so some of the different things that I've canned as far as a water bath, I've done tomatoes, salsas, spaghetti, and those I just pack straight up.
Spaghetti sauce, not actual spaghetti.
Yeah, not actual spaghetti sauce. And we've hot packed certain things. We've hot packed jalapenos, and we've hot packed, I want to say the green beans are hot packed as well. But
what does hot pack mean?
It means that you're pouring boiling hot water into the jars along with the vegetables.
And so again, if you have questions about what goes hot pack, and cold pack is just putting in cold water, you can go to that website, pickyourown.org. And I think we're just going to name this episode Pick Your Own.
I love that website.
And then it'll tell you like hot pack, cold pack. So now you know cold pack is regular water, hot pack is boiling water. And then what tools do you need? Because I can imagine, as I've seen, we're missing a critical tool right now. And it is a very hot experience working with canning, but we've been doing it for about 2 years because we're kind of slack. But what tools do you use or need?
Well, I need a magnetic wand. That's the one I need really bad. So a magnetic wand is pretty much like a plastic stick with a magnet at the end, but it's long. So when you've got your lids and your rings floating at the bottom of your water bath, you can use it to pick up. Right now, I use a slotted metal spoon to try to scoop my lids out, and it is not very effective. We also use a jar lifter, and it's got a special grip on it, so it grips the edge of those glass jars nice and tight. We use a ruler / spatula, which is a tool that kind of looks like it has little stairs at the bottom. It's tapered, and this helps release air bubbles along the side of the jar. And you can also use it to measure headspace, even though I usually just eyeball that. And then you've got a funnel. So the jar, and why this funnel is different than your standard funnel is because the bottom of it fits perfectly into a regular size canning jar.
So I'm looking on Amazon right now, and there is a 6-piece set, which I think you only describe like 3 or 4 pieces. And it has the funnel, the tongs, another set of tongs, which is just your normal tongs you have in your house. And then I don't know what that other tool is. I think it's for tightening lids. The little spatula thing and the magnetic wand for $10. So $10 to get your tools going. You keep them all together and you won't lose them. Because I can tell you, I tried to make a magnetic wand last year. I tried to hot glue a magnet to a skewer. And my forward thinking was not at the top of its game, because when I stuck it in the water, the glue melted again and I had to start over, and I had like 6 batches of pickles ready to go. So you got to buy them all together. So don't lose the magnetic wand, okay? Please. And if your wife cans for you, she will love you forever if you don't lose your magnetic wand. So those are the basic tools you need. And then what kind of pot do you need for water bathing?
I don't know if you need any specific type of pot. I know mine is a large, it's tall, it's over a foot tall, just metal pot that I think we bought for doing like shrimp boils and stuff.
Yep.
And it's got a lid on it. I don't generally...
We got it for $5 at Walmart.
Yeah, I mean, it's just a tall, it's a pot that's large enough that I can fit at least, I'd say 5 pint jars in, and then you need it to be tall enough so that when your jars are in the water, they're covered by at least an inch of water.
So again, I go back on Amazon, and the correct pot to use for this is it's like granite looking. It's a granite ware pot. And it's a bit wider, and it actually has racks that you put in it to where you can do multi-levels, which would be useful for us, but we just don't do it that way. We just do multiple batches. It's not a big deal. But you can get that with the complete set of everything else for $65. So, that's up to you which you want to use. But you just need a really big pot. And think about if you've ever gone to like a shrimp boil or seen somebody cook like a really big pot of chili. You need to get a different pot than what comes with your standard pot and pan set. Correct?
Yeah, even our largest sauce pot that we have, it's not tall enough. It might be wide enough, but it's really not tall enough to get that space over your jars.
Yeah, you could do those little teeny weeny, like, I don't know what they are, quarter pints or something.
Like 4-ounce jars.
Yeah.
Maybe you could do those in there, but
yeah, that's like for caviar or something.
yeah. I think we have candied ginger for some reason in one of those.
Yeah, because I was making kombucha at the time.
Yeah, so that's
And it
nobody really uses those little ones.
No.
Not in this house.
No, we did them for gifts one year. Because we can stuff for gifts. Yeah, we're those old people that can stuff for gifts. Everyone's like, oh, thanks.
We do hand out candy at Halloween, though, so we're not that extreme.
Yeah, next year or this year, maybe we'll give strawberries out from the garden. And then you just walk down the street and you'd see strawberries growing everywhere because everyone would just throw them out as soon as they get them. We're just joking. But yeah, so you do need a specific pot. Not a specific, but you need a good size pot. So.
Yeah, you do.
And then for when you're done, all you need is a dish towel. You need 2 dish towels. So you need 1 dish towel. You fold it. You want it as thick as possible to put them on the counter. And then you fold another one on and then you put them on top to help insulate them so the cooling isn't as rapid and it'll help them seal better.
Yeah, and one thing Ben said earlier about the amount of canning that you do at one time, it all depends on how much time in the day you have. If you had enough time to do a full-on canning party, you could. Generally speaking, I think, so in our house, how it works is Ben really is the one outside in the gardens, and he brings in all the fresh fruits and vegetables. And I consider it my personal challenge to be able to use those fruits and vegetables, because it's, and that's why we're doing this podcast talking about canning and freezing and drying, because the goal is to use up everything that you get and you don't have any food waste. So I try to can when I've got a proper amount of something. So when I know I've got enough tomatoes to do 3 to 4 jars and I can water bath them all at the same time, then I'll go ahead and take care of it then.
Do you want to tell everybody about the 3 pounds of green beans we just had to throw out?
No.
They got left in the fridge a little too long, but we didn't throw them out. We composted them. So.
We did. It happens. It is, we're real people.
Sure.
I'm no canning genie over here.
No. And you talk about canning tomatoes. So if your garden's not producing a lot of tomatoes, but you really want to make tomato sauce, and this is how we really got started. You can go to your farmer's market or like a roadside vegetable stand, and you go and you ask them for seconds tomatoes. I'll say that again. Seconds tomatoes. And that'll be like the bruised tomatoes or something. And they might not have a lot that day, but they'll say, oh yeah, we'll bring them to you. Because they're not pretty enough to put out and most people won't buy them. But they know right away when you say that you're going to can them. And they're like a quarter of the price. It's ridiculous how many we got. So I remember the first time I did it, the guy was like, oh yeah, I'll bring you a basket. And we got, I guess, a bushel basket full for like $10. And I think we made stewed tomatoes, I think. No, we made spaghetti sauce, and we got like 4 or 5 quart jars out of it. So, if you're making, if you're going to the store and you're buying spaghetti sauce, if you buy Presto, it's probably like $3 or $4 a jar. So, you save a little bit of money, and then you can make your own recipes. And I mean, let's be quite frank, it's going to be better than that bland stuff they give you. So, and we load it up with the garlic, by the way. So that's a good thing. You can use too. Little, I guess they call them a life hack.
That's correct.
Okay. So that's basically water bathing vegetables. So, and then we're going to let her take over about jellies and jams. So
jellies and jams, they're one of my favorite things to make. And I just recently, I don't know if you call it a life hack, but got some good information online for how to make the best consistency jelly. So jellies are pretty simple. Whenever you're doing anything with a canning recipe, find a recipe. It's not safe, or you're just not going to get a good end product if you don't follow a proper recipe. And most of the times with jam and jelly, so a key component is pectin, and pectin is bought in your grocery store section with all your other canning goods, usually in the baking aisle. Pectin has its own fruit recipes on there. It'll tell you how much sugar to use. There are low sugar or no sugar recipes. You have to follow those recipes to a T, because the amount of pectin and the amount of sugar you put in, the two work together. So if you don't have the proper sugar ratio, your jelly won't set like it's supposed to. So I pretty much just work off of the pectin recipes. But if you had a recipe from somewhere else, that's fine too. Just follow the recipe. Essentially, you just wash your fruits, you mash them up, you put them in a large saucepan, and you heat them up. And off the top of my head, I don't remember in what specific order, but once they get to a certain point, you add sugar, you add pectin. You might add that before it starts to boil, but you bring it to a boil. And I want to say it literally only takes maybe 5-10 minutes to make your jelly on the stove before it's ready to can. And then the hack that I found is that you take a cold spoon, and dip it into your jelly once you think it's done, pull it out, give it a minute to cool, and let it set. And depending on the consistency, if it's too thin, then you can add a little bit more pectin, bring it back up to a boil, and try it again. And so it's just a good way to test, because if you don't test it and you just go ahead and can it, then you might end up with a more runny consistency than you really want.
And we do low sugar or no sugar. Which one do you do?
We've done both. Now, I'm a sugar person, so I don't really prefer the no sugar. The last time I did it, I used stevia and followed a recipe, but I prefer to do low sugar.
Okay, so we do low sugar, and it's fine. I think it's fine.
It's delicious.
Yeah. So I didn't know that you were eating jelly straight out of the hot pot. That bothers me. Why am I not getting a taste? Why do I not get a taste?
The things that go on in the kitchen when you're not around.
Man, this is sad. And just so you know, because I love you so much, I just bought you the magnetic wand.
I love you.
Actually, I had to buy a whole new kit because the magnetic wand was $5. So I just bought the whole new kits for $10. So we have extras when things break or go bad. So that's kind of how it goes. And then when you were talking about following recipes, when it comes to canning, when in doubt, throw it out. Because it won't always smell or look weird, right?
Yeah, I mean, one of the number one rules that I follow is that once a jar has sealed and I put it away, the next time I go to take it out and open it, I need to... Ben's looking at my shopping list. Don't look at that right now. I want a sunrise alarm clock that plays nature sounds. Thank you very much. He does not like the alarm clock I currently have.
Yeah. Anyway,
you got me sidetracked. So when I pull a jar of jelly out and I want to open it, I actually want to get my can opener out and have that nice firm seal on it. If I can open it with just my fingers, or if it's easy to open, or if it doesn't make that pop, then it's bad. I consider it bad. It needs jars, the lids, when they're sealed, they suck down. They don't stick out anymore. If you can put your finger in the center of that lid and hear it go boop, 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 and pop up and down, it hasn't sealed.
Yeah, it doesn't make a high-pitched noise. But the other thing to do is when you're done and they're cooled, you take the band off and then you pick it up by that little lid and it'll pop off if it's not attached. So I go back behind her and I check, because botulism is a real thing. And I'm sure that it's terrible, but I don't take any chances. And I've only thrown out a couple things. One, I just threw out some green beans because when you cook them, we just learned this. So like I said, you're always learning. The water came out of the green beans. And when I went to go open it, there was like a 1/4 inch of water in the bottom. And I was like, what in the world's going on? They were sealed, but the water had come out. And so you will lose some water, but you should not lose much. So if it's less than 3/4 full of water, then like some of the green beans or some of your vegetables might be out of the water a little bit in the can, and that's fine, just a very little. But if it's any more, throw it out. And the other thing was somebody had given me a bunch of venison, deer meat, and I tried to make some Brunswick stew. And because the rule in our house is we don't eat meat unless we kill it or somebody we know has killed it. So I tried to can this venison, and after I canned it, I kept looking at it, and I was like, I'm gonna crack it open, and I never had the gall to open it up because I was scared. So I just threw it out and save the jar. But if you're worried about it and you think it's gonna be an issue, don't do it. If you put aspirin in it, just throw it out because it's not going to be good. But so now you know how to make jellies, and you know how to identify what food can be water bathed. So now we're going to move on to the actual holy grail of canning, pressure canning. Okay. So you're going to need to get a pressure cooker. You can get any pressure cooker unless you have one of those glass top stoves, which is what we have and we've always had. So the problem with the glass top stove is they get hot, and then the heat cuts off, and then it goes away, and then it comes back, and then it goes away, and then it comes back. So that's how it stays warm versus one of the ones, I don't have no clue what it's called, but the curly Q thing, you know what I'm talking about? I want to say old school, but
it's just a coil.
A coil.
Yeah.
They stay consistently hot. So you need to get a flat bottom pressure cooker for your glass top stove. So the one that we use is the Presto 01781 23-quart pressure canner and cooker, and it's a flat bottom. So we've done it on 3 different stoves that are
glass
top, and we have had no issues. Correct. Everything has sealed. Everything is pressure cooked. So it is a little bit of an investment to get the pressure cooker. It is the 23-quart is $76 on Amazon. So it is a little bit of an investment, but again, if you're pressure cooking and canning, it pays for itself in time. And it definitely pays for itself literally in time if you're pressure cooking your food.
Yeah, and I mean, this one, it says that it's got extended 12-year warranty. I mean, these things, like any other kitchen appliance, it's going to last.
Yeah.
If you take care of it, it'll last for quite a while.
Yeah, and the one thing you need to do in order to keep it safe is keep an eye on the gasket on the inside of it. That is the important part. That is what keeps the top from blowing off, from letting off too much steam and all that. And it comes with a little weight that you put on top of it to block the steam, to keep the pressure on it. Don't lose that weight. So when you're done and it's all clean and all that good stuff, put that weight inside the pot so it's always there. And then if you want to, I believe you just take a little bit of olive oil every once in a while, like once or twice a year, maybe just a little bit, and put a thin coat around that gasket to keep it from dry rotting, because if you don't use it all the time. So how do you pressure can?
So I do the same process of sterilization with my jars, and once my food's ready, literally all you have to do is set your prep jars inside the pressure cooker, seal it up. Now, if we were using this one, again, you go by either the guidelines in your recipe, or probably more for this one, the guidelines on your pressure cooker. Usually you add a specific amount of water to the inside of the pressure cooker.
It's not much.
Yeah, it's not much.
It's like a half inch or an inch or something like that. It tells you.
It's enough to go a half inch or an inch up on your jars. And then you just close the top. And for this one, it's got a pressure gauge. And so your recipe or your pressure cooker guide will tell you for how long and to what pressure you need to bring it up to. If you're at a higher altitude, that's going to change things a little bit. And then once you've reached your temperature, you try to maintain it there cook it for the 5-10 minutes or however long it takes to process. And then when you're all done, you turn it off and just let it cool down. And you're done.
Yeah. Follow the directions in the recipe book that comes with the canner for that kind of stuff, because it's made specifically for that canner. So that's a good way. And the way you regulate the pressure is based on the heat. So you would turn the heat down until you get that pressure that you want. And you want to keep it above that pressure. So if it says, let me make sure I tell you the right number. Yeah, if it says you need it at 14 pounds of pressure and your gauge goes up in increments of 5, and when you're pressure canning and it's goes a 14, then it drops to 12, but you need to keep it at 14 for 3 minutes, then I personally start that timer over once I get it back up to 14.
Yeah, that's a correct way to do it.
So I start over. I don't take anything out or anything like that. I just kind of start the timer over. And if it goes up to 16, it's not a big deal. But you want to keep that pressure on the recommended. So you can't necessarily mix different vegetables. You need to do all of your okra at once, all of your green beans at once, so on and so forth. You can't do a little bit of this and a little bit of that.
I would say the same goes for the size jars. I would do all same size jars.
Yeah, I don't know. We've always used same size jars for the most part, but yeah, that makes sense because it's different sizes. Again, just be safe. Different jars, if they're different sizes, they'll heat up different. My thinking would be, but if you have a question about that, you can go to the pickyourown.org, and I'm sure they have something. I'm not going to look through it because it'll take me, I'll be sitting here an hour listening to me click, but it'll be on there. So
I would say follow your recipes. That's your take-home lesson today with the water bath or pressure canning.
Yeah. And then when you're done and it's off, you take that weight off of it, and then it'll release the pressure. So that was the worst part for us, was getting that weight off. And you got to kind of do a grab and snatch deal where you grab it and you pull it off real quick, and it's going to whistle and shoot steam everywhere. And it gets kind of crazy and loud for a minute, but then you'll watch that pressure gauge drop. And when that pressure gauge drops, you're going to twist the top off. And when the top comes off, you open it so that it is facing away from you so that the rest of the steam and stuff can come up. So you just kind of angle it up, and then the steam will go away from you. And that's the safety mechanism that I'm going to give you for not getting burnt.
Yeah, I would only open that if that pressure read 0.
Yeah. Don't rush it. Canning is not a rushing thing. So, yeah. And then you take them off, you put them back on that towel, and you cover them, and you just want to keep them insulated so that they can. Now, one thing, I don't know if you talked about, how tight do you put the bands on when you can?
So they're supposed to be hand tight. They're not supposed to be super tight. And so here in...
Gentlemen, that means you do not gorilla them on.
Yeah.
You just hand tight them.
But then, gentlemen or ladies.
Yeah, but guys, in my experience, and I have excessive experience with people tightening stuff.
Can you do this at home?
See?
Here we go.
Here we go. No, I used to teach a class back in the day about tightening battery packs onto digital scales for the ocean. And every time we got one back, I had to maintain them. The guys had them. They were always over tight and ruined. So in my experience, the guys kind of try to muscle stuff on when it doesn't need to be. But, women can be strong too and might do it, so.
Or you can be like me. And in the case of our green beans, I did not tighten them enough. So I think that's how we lost our water. But
yeah, so you just want to be careful with it. And the reason for hand tightening them is?
The reason for hand tightening them is you need to let a little bit of air inside the jar escape. So there's something called headspace, and that's what that one tool was that we talked about earlier. And you measure the amount of headspace, and it's from the top of the jar down to the contents. And every recipe will tell you how much headspace you're supposed to have. And you want to make sure that you process jars to whatever the recipe says for headspace. Otherwise, they may not seal properly.
Yeah. And can I tell you that the other tool pack that I almost bought had a digital timer in it, and it made it $5 more? In the world of smartphones and timers on stoves and everything, it seems a little ridiculous, but I don't know. I just saw that. But anyways, yeah, so don't over tighten them. And then you don't have to tighten them again until they're completely cooled and you've tested that lid.
Yeah, correct.
And always buy the same brand lid that you have or the same brand jar. So don't mix and match brands. Right?
Right.
Okay. Anything else for canning? I feel like there's like so much more you can talk about.
No. I was just going to talk a little bit about fermenting when we get to our recipe.
Oh, fermenting, because this is a different way of canning too. Well, why don't you talk about that and then we'll get into the recipe, what the fermenting is, because certain things you can ferment, right?
I can't really speak to anything other than pickles because that's the only thing I've done.
Sauerkraut. But that's different. That's a different kind of fermenting. So, yeah.
So I'm not sure the process with other foods, but one of the first things that we started canning was pickles. And we're very specific in our family with what type of pickles we like. And you'll get to hear it's not really a secret recipe because it is out there on the internet.
No, it's secret because we had to search high and low. I feel like we went to the top of the Himalayas to get this recipe.
We might have. If anybody's a Clausen pickle fan out there, then you will like this pickle recipe.
Boom.
Yeah. So what kind of cucumbers were we growing?
So, no, we always grow because, again, when you think about what you're going to grow and what you're going to can, think about how you're going to use it. So the specific variety that we grow is Boston pickling cucumber. And so those grow to the right size for pickles. And then at the same time, if you want to, I don't taste the difference. They taste fine with me when we slice them. So the cucumbers are Boston pickling cucumbers, and they're just a smaller variety. They don't get like a foot long or anything like that. They're not, maybe 6 to 7 inches, and then they'll get bigger and bigger. But, that's just kind of how that works. But we grow those. Maybe I should try a different variety, but I like it and I'm going to keep growing it. Actually, I take that back. If I haven't looked for this, but if I find something that has a resistance to powdery mildew, then that is what I will start growing. I don't care what size it is. But until then, we're just going to keep running these, but they are the right size. So we get those, and then what do you do?
Okay, so the perfect size pickle, I think for me, is around 4 to 5 inches. So when I get the cucumbers out of the garden, what I'll do is I'll quarter them, and I wash them, then quarter them, and then I've already got my sterilized prep jars, and at the very bottom, I'll put some spices, and then I pack them full of the cucumbers. Now, we didn't say this before, but anytime you go to can anything, it should be a full jar. It should never be a partial jar. It may not process properly. So I pack them pretty tight, tight enough because you're going to add your pickling juice into, or your pickling concoction, whatever you want to call it, in with the cucumbers. So if there's not enough in there, they'll start to float to the top.
Well, hold on. Before you say that, when you pick your cucumbers, I learned this last year. Do not try and can over-ripened cucumbers. They turn mushy. So yeah, it was kind of gross when we opened a can and we're like, ooh, but
yeah, nobody wants a mushy pickle. So some of the key things with fermenting, you want to use pickling salt or naturally fine sea salt. I buy a pickling salt, and again, they're in the same, once it gets to be summertime, the grocery stores usually have a section all set up for pickling, or not for pickling, but for canning. And then you always want to clean your produce. One of the key things when fermenting pickles, so once I've made my jars, they have to sit on the counter for a few days. They have to remain fully submerged within that jar. So at least half an inch underneath the brine while it's fermenting. You cover the fermentation container. So for my jars, what I do is I just put one of the canning lids on top. You can use a clean towel, You don't want to use plastic wrap because you don't really want it airtight, because you need that airflow to grow, to get your fermentation going. So
What are you growing in there?
so I do grow something. If you want your pickles to properly grow the funk that shows up on top, and yeah, I'm going to call it funk, you need the temperature to also be between about 70, 75 degrees for faster fermentation.
Yeah, we keep our house a little cooler than that, so it takes longer.
It takes a little longer,
To be clear, I do not look inside of the jars when they are doing this because I wouldn't eat them. So that's why I let her do it all, because it's gross.
It's, it's all about knowing where your food comes from. And, we went plant-based for a reason, and that's all I'll say. But, so knowing how your pickles get made, there is the white stuff. Now, this is how you know that you've got pickles going. The white residue that sometimes you can see on top of your sauerkraut or hot sauce, it's a wild yeast, and it forms usually when fermentation process has been going on for a couple of days, and it's safe. It does look a little sketchy.
Can you make bread with it?
I doubt it.
I mean, I hear yeast and I think bread, right?
I don't know.
Okay.
I don't know enough about yeast. I know I use dry active yeast when I make bread, but
anyways.
So you skim off this. You just don't want it to ever become furry or colorful, or it shouldn't have an unpleasant odor. And then if you see that, then you have to start all over again. But once I see this white stuff on the top of my pickle jars, I skim it off, and usually either that day or maybe next day, I know my jars are ready for canning and processing.
And then you water bath them?
And then I water bath them.
Oh, okay. I didn't know you water bath. Man, I learned something new today. So when I made those pickles that time, they didn't turn out good. It's because I didn't ferment them.
Yeah, so the reason why I can water bath them, even though it's a fresh vegetable out of the garden, the recipe calls for it's got cider vinegar in it. So it's got enough vinegar to make it a high acid food.
Is this the exact recipe that you have here?
Yes.
Oh. This is not in the recipe container that we have? I probably used the entire wrong recipe last time. That's why they didn't turn out. She was sick last year, and I made a bunch of pickles, and apparently I did it way wrong. So
no, it's in both places.
Oh, okay. Well, I didn't ferment them, but and then another thing too, I forgot this earlier, especially in the end of the year. If you have an app on your phone called Ibotta, IBOTTA, it gives you discounts at grocery stores based on, or no, it gives you money back from grocery stores based on products that you buy. And last year they had Ball cans on there. Buy one pack, which are like $8, and you got $5 back. So then that's money that it essentially puts money into an account on there. And then once you get, I think it's $40, you can cash it in for a gift card to a certain amount of places. So that's another way that you could save money and really get 12 jars for $3. So just keep that in mind. But yeah, so we're going to move directly now into our Claussen pickle recipe. The best way to take 25 cents a pound vegetable and turn it into a $5 money saver.
Yeah, the knockoff Claussen pickle recipe, the only pickle recipe that we have really made. Although I did pickle some okra this year, which I'm excited about.
Yeah, and let me just talk about that real quick, because I've said it before. In every episode we've been talking about this. Slimy okra is gross, and we went to a restaurant and they had pickled okra and we tried it and it was delicious. But what was it, bread and butter flavored?
It was sweet flavored.
Okay. So yeah, we did those. But anyways.
Gotta put a little sugar on it.
Yeah, you gotta put some sugar on top. But anyways, we'll get to the Claussen recipe.
Okay, so this recipe is for 4 quart-sized jars. So I have actually taken this recipe on the note card I'm looking at and broken it down to a 2-jar and 1-jar recipe, because sometimes I do not have as many cucumbers as this calls for. So I'm going to give you the full-blown, all-out 4-jar recipe. So you need 35 to 40 cucumbers, a gallon of cold water, a cup of cider vinegar, 2 tablespoons of pickling spices, 2/3 cup salt. And remember, we're talking specifically the pickling salt, 4 cloves of garlic, and 4 fresh either dill heads or 4 tablespoons of dried dill seed.
So the dill heads we grew in our garden, and that's how we got our dill. So that's another way that you can use dill. And we actually specifically grow dill for this.
Yeah. And that actually, dill produced enough to have plenty for the recipe.
Yeah. Are we done with it? Because I haven't grown dill in a couple of years. Do we still have some of that dill left over?
No, I don't believe so. Actually,
I think we do.
might. I think we have some.
So one season,
not much though.
One season of dill lasted us 5 years of canning, and we can probably 8 jars of pickles a year, maybe 8 quart jars a year.
I started to set a limit because I realized we don't really eat as many pickles as we thought. But that's the thing with the dill seed too. I mean, we really don't use it in any other recipes.
No, but our son that's 5 is he eats a hamburger and he's like, I want a pickle. I want a pickle. So. And a fresh made Clausen pickle by you, put in a pan and warmed up so it's a little bit crispy. Ooh, doggy. That's good stuff.
This ain't Mayberry.
Sorry. So, yeah, and then you do the fermenting process.
Yep, so you do the fermenting process. So pretty much what you're going to end up putting on the bottom of your jar, you're going to layer the dill, the garlic, and then you're going to put the cucumbers in. And then in a separate bowl, you mix your water, your vinegar, your spices, and your salt. And then you just pour the brine over the cucumbers, let them ferment. Another key point is you don't want to put them in direct sunlight. You need to keep them just somewhere warm. And then if the foam, as it develops, you want to spoon it off daily. If the foam or any sort of fuzz attaches to a cucumber, you need to take that cucumber out and remove it from the batch.
You can just remove one cucumber?
You can just remove one. And
you know this for a fact?
Yes.
Okay. So yeah, again, I get freaked out. So you literally know that I can remove this one cucumber and throw it out and everything else will be good?
Yes.
Okay. Interesting.
So remember, these are wild yeast. These are not bacteria, essentially, that you're growing. So...
yeah, it's like, you make kombucha. You're essentially growing yeast to feed everything. So, and then you can them in a water bath with 2 inches of water above it, or at least an inch of water above it, and then you let it cool, and you're done.
And you're done.
And you do not need to store them in the refrigerator. They can stay out.
If you wanted to store a jar in the refrigerator, you could.
You don't have to can it first if you do that.
No, you don't have to can it. Once it's done fermenting on the counter, if you wanted to just pop one in the fridge right away, you could go ahead and just put it in the fridge.
But it will not last. Correct?
No, it won't last.
Okay. So you just be ready to eat them pickles. So a lot of times, sometimes we have pickles that are not, that didn't seal right, and we'll just give those jars away with the one thing that they have to give the jar back, which I don't think I've gotten the last jar back.
Now, I know there's other pickling strategies out there where you can put things directly in the fridge. So again, stick to your recipe. This is just our recipe that we use for pickling.
Oh,
have fun out there.
You sound like you were going to say something else. And I did forget to talk about how long stuff can last. So we made apple butter back in 2013, right?
2015.
2015, 4 years ago, and we're still eating that apple butter. Do we have any jars left, or did we finally finish it?
No, we still have jars.
So we still have jars of apple butter 4 years later, coming up in 5 years, and we eat it. So that's how long it lasts for. And I don't know. I'm actually starting to get a little worried.
I was going to say, I think there's recommendations, and I was just talking to somebody at work that thought after a year you're not supposed to eat canned goods, but
no, that's from the store. This
is not. And I love you, Laurel, but she's not the most granola person, as she would call it. So I'm sure there's a guideline that's put out there. So I'm not going to necessarily give advice saying to eat your canned goods after so many years. I would just fact check us on that one with how long you can eat something that's been stored for.
Yeah, I mean, you just got to be safe. But it does last. And then another thing that we did is we bought a electric canner, pressure cooker, rice cooker, all-in-one type situation. That's really been a godsend for us.
I can't believe we didn't even talk about that till now. I
know.
love that thing.
Yeah, and that's why we only use pint jars now at certain times, because it only fits pint jars. Okay, that's the downfall of it. And we actually only use it for pressure canning. But, if you have one jar that you want to do, you can throw it in there real quick and it saves you a lot of time, and you can actually bang out more food.
So let's talk about how easy this electric pressure canner is.
Please do.
You literally put the jar in of whatever you've made. You fill it up with whatever water is recommended. You close it. You push a button for the time that you need to run it, 10, 15 minutes, and you hit start. You don't have to watch a dial for how much pressure. You can hear it start to get pressurized. Once it's pressurized, it'll start your time for how long it needs to cook. And then it's got a similar thing like the weight on top of our stovetop pressure canner, where instead of taking the weight, there's not a weight you take off. You just kind of tap the release button and you can release the steam gently. But it's just so amazing to be able to set it on the counter, hit a button, and walk away from it and not have to babysit the pressure gauge.
Okay, and I just looked up storage for it, and it says that you're going to get a kick out of this. I've found that most canned vegetable and fruit retain good quality for 8 to 12 months. Applesauce and apple butter stay good for 2 or even 3 years. So that's why we're still eating apple butter with no issues. Because, how much apple butter can you eat? So, there's your recommendation based on this website that we've been talking about. 8 to 12 months. So you can a lot, then you can cycle them. And
it looks like it says that mostly the quality goes down. It's not necessarily a safety issue.
Yeah, it might get a little mushy maybe, but we haven't thrown anything out.
And again, whenever you're opening something, you check the integrity of the jar itself to make sure that, it's still got that airtight seal. And you look and you smell and you do just a baseline assessment to make sure that your food looks and smells how it should. And like Ben said, if there's any question, then you toss it. But otherwise, I don't think we've really come across anything. Even our canned venison, all the jars open correctly and the food was probably fine. And again, if you're canning meats, now we really haven't ever canned meat other than that. When you're reheating, you want to bring it up to the proper temperature to ensure that you're killing off any sort of lingering bacteria. But all in all, it sounds like, if you do the process right and you're just pretty meticulous from start to finish, you can keep canned goods for quite a while.
Yeah, this site continues to go on saying people have eaten stuff that they've forgotten about 10 years later. So if you do it right, it lasts. And we do not have any advice for canning meats. Just to be clear on that. We are not giving any advice on that. And everybody needs to learn how to can their certain things and look up recipes. We're just giving you guidelines and an introduction in how to make your garden's vegetables last longer throughout the year so you can continue to enjoy them. So if you have any questions, let us know. I'm actually going to put a picture of the broken down recipe that my wife did with all her math so you can make your pickles based on certain jar amounts. I'll put it on our Instagram, which is Backyard Gardens, the movie. And it'll be on our Facebook too, Backyard Gardens, the movie. So you guys can find it there. And if you have any questions, let us know. And until next time, we will talk to you soon. We're going on vacation, so we're going to go surf it up for a couple days. So y'all have a good day, and we'll talk to you soon. Cut. So if you have any questions or want to know what we've been up to, you can follow us on our social media pages. On Facebook and Instagram, it's Backyard Gardens, the movie. And on Facebook, we also have a group. It's called Backyard Gardens. We have a website, backyardgardensthemovie.com. You can sign up there for an email to get updates about production and release dates for our movie. And give us a like and a review on iTunes or any of your favorite services, because it'll really help us reach more people, because we want to help everybody learn to grow and grow for change. Cut.
Now you know why people feel like celebrating at harvest time.
All over the world, people have feasting and good times when the crops have been gathered in.